Drakengard. My point of making this video is to help those who want to get the story and lore that started it all for the NieR series. It's also to help those understand the references that are made in the NieR games, since surprisingly enough, there are a few Drakengard references that tie the story together, and some of those references can even be found in NieR Automata. This will be a complete summary of the Drakengard games besides Drakengard 2, due to the fact that it was not directed by Yoko Taro, the usual director for both the Drakengard and NieR titles. This means that Drakengard 2 and its events are not canon to any of the other games in the series. I plan to tackle these games in a very specific way to try and make it easier for those watching to understand. As is tradition with any Drakengard or NieR game, there are multiple endings for each of the Drakengard games. For Drakengard 1, there are 5 endings, endings A, B, C, D, and finally E. Ending E being the canon ending that leads into NieR Replicant. For Drakengard 3, there are also 5 endings, but only 4 of them, those being endings A, B, C, and D, are in the game, and are only canon to their specific timelines, as the concept of multiple timelines existing was introduced in Drakengard 3.
Insane.
The final ending, ending E, which is from a novella written in the perspective of one of the major characters, is canon and leads to its game counterpart. For Drakengard 1, I will go into pretty good detail of the first route and its ending, but every ending that follows afterwards I will be as brief as I can be, with the exception of ending E. With Drakengard 3, I will give a somewhat brief description of all of its events that happen, and tie in any loose ends and references with facts that you may wish to know. I think that's about it for what I wanted to cover though. Without any further delay, let's get into it. The events of Drakengard take place in a medieval fantasy world called Midgard. The world of Midgard is protected from falling into deep chaos by the 4 seals that protect it: the seal of the ocean, forest, desert, and the final seal, the seal of the goddess, which happens to be a woman who is ultimately chosen to be the seal. If the seals and goddess are destroyed, evil beings known as the Watchers will enter the world in order to destroy humanity. The Empire, a power led by a mysterious cult of red-eyed individuals, believe that if they were to destroy all the seals, they will be granted good fortune and prosperity. The story starts with Prince Kaim, our main protagonist, who is in the middle of a war with the Empire, fighting alongside his army, the Union, to protect his sister, Furii. As fate would have it, she is the current goddess of the seal. Kaim and the Union must protect her at all costs. During the battle, Kaim gets struck from behind and gets mortally wounded, but continues to try and fight his way into Furii's castle, where she is currently located. As he stumbles into the castle gates, he finds a wounded red dragon on the ground. As he stares at the dragon, memories of his parents who were killed by a dragon race through his mind, and Kaim starts to get angry. As he's about to finish the red dragon off, she speaks to him. Kaim stops and asks the red dragon if she wants to live, and asks her if she wants to form a pact. In the Drakengard universe, a pact is normally a contract between a human and a beast. If both parties happen to be on the edge of death, like in this case, they both get a second chance at life. If one of the parties dies while in the pact with each other, both will die. They are more commonly known as pact partners, and they essentially become a shared entity. The human gains supernatural powers as well, but it comes at a cost. The human must pay some type of price for the pact, and in Kaim's case, he ends up losing his voice and the ability to speak. Pact partners are also able to communicate with each other telepathically. You can tell what a human gave up when forming a pact by where their pact emblem is located on their body. In Kaim's case, it's located on his tongue. After Kaim forms his pact with the Red Dragon, we are introduced to both Furii and Kaim's best friend, Eniwart, who happens to be a musician. We learn that Furii and Eniwart were engaged to each other, but because Furii had to become the goddess of the seal, it was called off. Eniwart suggested they go to the elf village as it would be a safe place to protect Furii. Unfortunately, by the time the group got there, it was too late and the elf village was attacked, no longer making it the safe haven they figured it would be. The Red Dragon then hears a voice. This voice belongs to another one of our main characters, Hierarch Verdelay. Verdelay is the spiritual leader of the Union and the protector of the 4 seals. He also happens to be in a pact with a petrified dragon, and because he is in a pact, he is able to hear and communicate with other pact partners. He tells the group to bring Furii to his current location, a temple in the desert, so that she may be protected.
I'm not going to pause much, but wow, this is not what I was expecting, knowing what type of world NieR is. This is very high fantasy, classical JRPG. I'm super curious how we get from here to NieR.
Eniwart and Furii proceed to the desert temple, while Kaim and the Red Dragon stay behind to investigate the area further. Kaim then finds a dying elf that tells him that the cult of the Watchers has a shrine and that they took everyone there. A collapsed villager asks Kaim if he can help retake the village from the Empire, which happens to be located in the Fairy Valley. Kaim agrees and goes off, but not before we are introduced to probably one of the most controversial characters in all of the Drakengard series, Leonard. For the sake of some people watching who may not like the theme associated with this character, and for the sake of YouTube not coming after my soul, I won't go too much into detail about him, but instead leave a link in the description that explains this character in more detail. The long and short of it is that Leonard is the man that lives in a forest with his 3 younger brothers because his parents were killed by the Empire. While Leonard was away from his home for various reasons, he came back to see that his 3 younger brothers were killed. This leads Leonard to feel as if he has nothing else to live for and attempts to end it all, but ends up dropping the knife. A random fairy comes along to mock and torment him, and then he decides to make a pact with the fairy. Leonard ends up losing his eyesight as a result and meets Kaim afterwards. He decides to follow Kaim because he hopes that he will eventually be killed as a result of traveling with Kaim. Back to the main story, we hear the Red Dragon tell us that Verdelay's voice is gone, which means something may have happened to him, NieR, and Footyeye. Kaim rushes to the desert to find that Footyeye is okay, but NieR and Verdelay were captured by the Empire. Kaim and the Red Dragon go towards the Imperial dungeon where they believe their captured companions are located. Kaim successfully manages to rescue Verdelay, and he tells us that NieR was taken to a different prison. He also states the motive of the Empire and what they are trying to accomplish. They are trying to summon something called the Seeds of Resurrection, and the only way to do that is to break all of the seals. We then flash back to NieR. He is being mentally tortured by a mysterious individual who is reading his thoughts back to him. Eventually, though, his mind snaps and his eyes go red, which signifies that he is under control by someone or something. Kaim and Verdelay make it to the desert seal only to find that it's been broken. The party is then introduced to a second side character, Adeosh. Much like Leonard, Adeosh doesn't really play too big of a role in the grander scheme of things, so if you wish to learn more about her character as well, there will be a link in the description. The long and short of her character backstory, however, is that she's an elf woman who has gone insane because her family was slaughtered by Empire forces. Going through her story-specific level, it brings our party to the Seal of the Ocean, which has also been destroyed. Kaim and the others eventually return to camp, where they are then greeted by NieR, except this time he's been broken from his torture and is influenced by something. He reveals that he has made a pact with a black dragon, sacrificing his ability to make songs and sing like he used to in order to gain strength that he wants to protect Footyeye. Kaim knows that something is up and stops NieR from proceeding any closer. The two then start fighting each other, but Kaim is easily overpowered. As they fight, Kaim realizes that NieR's dragon is the same dragon that killed his parents and rushes in to attack it, but luckily the red dragon protects Kaim from its attack. NieR ends up taking Footyeye and leaves Kaim behind. After this, Kaim and the others realize that they now must storm the Imperial lands and try to make their way to the castle so they can rescue Footyeye. While on the way, the party meets the final side character, Seray. Seray is also a victim of the Empire forces and lost his family as a result, though he does still have one family member left, his younger twin sister, Mana. It was made apparent that Seray's mother loved him and only him, and eventually led his sister Mana into the mountains and abandoned her. As he was looking around for his sister, he ends up forming a pact with a golem, sacrificing his time, which means that he will never grow up and can never die from old age. The two join Kaim because they feel they will eventually find Seray's younger sister. After adventuring a bit further, the Red Dragon hears the death cry of the fairies, which signifies that 3 of the 4 seals have been broken, which just leaves Footyeye as the last remaining seal. The Union has gathered in a central location for what seems to be the final battle between them and the Empire. The party storms the battlefield in an attempt to help the Union, and after a difficult battle...
Sorry, I need to look this up. I've not heard of Drakengard before. I'm out of my element. Like, for how old this game seems, this is impressive. I'm surprised it's not more well known. Maybe it is, and NieR is definitely popular. 2003. Okay. Almost 20 years ago. And Drakengard 2 is 2005. NieR in 2010. Oh, interesting. They did NieR before they did Drakengard 3. Drakengard 2003, Drakengard 2 2005, NieR in 2010, Drakengard 3 in 2013, NieR Automata 2017, NieR Reincarnation 2021. Crazy. Okay. This is very, like, Blizzard cutscene to me, like StarCraft, Warcraft 3,
Though the Union has won
that type
the fight,
of era.
or at least that's how it
around
seems
that
at
time.
first, until a few magical bombs are dropped by the Empire, wiping out a majority of the Union's forces and taking away their victory. We are then shown a cutscene of NieR talking to the Priestess of the Watchers asking to kill Kaim. Afterwards, we are locked into another fight with NieR. During the fight, NieR leaves and Kaim quickly follows after him into the floating fortress where Footy is being held, but by the time Kaim reaches her, it's too late, as the Priestess of the Watchers had already killed Footy while Kaim and NieR were fighting. It is then revealed that the Priestess of the Watchers is none other than Saray's younger twin sister, Mana. The Red Dragon then states that every seal has been broken and that the seeds of resurrection have been sown all across the land, and it is now the end of the world as they know it. NieR comes rushing into the room to find a dead Footy, which snaps him out of his trance he had been in since he was first captured. Mana then starts to chant a phrase belonging to the Watchers, and by the twin voices that played during it, it's clear that she is also being controlled by the very same group that have been responsible for everything thus far. NieR, who's been overcome with grief, decides to take Footy's lifeless body and comes up with a plan. He believes that if he puts her body into one of the seeds of resurrection, it will bring her back to life so that they can be together again. Though one fact that NieR isn't aware of is that the seeds aren't only known as the seeds of resurrection, but they are also called the seeds of destruction. Kaim catches up with NieR for one last battle between old friends, and Kaim is successful in stopping NieR from fusing Footy with the seed, and NieR flies off to an unknown location. Kaim reaches Mana and is about to end her life, but Verdelay steps in and tries to cast a spell on her. It fails, and Mana is powered up by the Watchers to grow to a gigantic size. After one last long battle, Kaim and the Red Dragon defeat Mana. After the battle, while still under slight control of the Watchers, Mana is at war with herself. She begs Kaim to kill her for her wrongdoings, but Kaim refuses, and the Red Dragon says that she has to live with that guilt for the rest of her life. I should remind you all that Mana was originally led into the mountains and abandoned by her mother. Eventually, after being alone for so long and hearing the voice of the Watchers, it caused her to be controlled. There is much more of a backstory for Mana and her family, which I will make sure to explain more in detail once we reach Drakengard 3, so keep it in the back of your head. Right after, the Red Dragon asks who should be the next seal so they can prevent this catastrophe from ever happening again. Verdelay thinks on it, but soon after, the Red Dragon offers herself to be the next goddess of the seal since no human could ever rival her strength. At this point, the ritual to create the next goddess of the seal begins. The Red Dragon is on the ground in pain, and Kaim, for the first time since the story started, sheds tears over his companion. This is the point where the Red Dragon tells Kaim her name for the first time. The Red Dragon is known as Angelus. After Verdelay finishes making her into the next goddess of the seal, she fades away, and that marks the end of Ending A, which is known as the anguish of an unsmiling watcher. Now that we have covered the real bulk of the game, I will quickly go over endings B through D, and once we finish, we will finally arrive at the ending that started it all for NieR, Ending E. For Ending B, we will be going back to the point where Kaim and NieR were fighting each other in an aerial battle. From this point,
okay, I was thinking about skipping these, but
escapes from Kaim
let's see what
with
happens.
Footy body and finds one of the
Kinda
seeds of
interested now.
resurrection. This time, he's successful in putting Footy's corpse into the seed, and while everything seems to be going well, a monstrous Footy emerges from the seed and kills NieR. It seems that if a human is put inside one of the seeds, they are turned into a monster whose sole purpose is to wipe out humanity. The final battle for Ending B is between Kaim and his monstrous sister, Footy. Kaim ends up victorious, and as he stands with his sister's corpse in his arms, he realizes that the fight between him and his sister isn't exactly over yet because the seeds have made multiple copies of the monstrous Footy. This is Ending B, Flowers for the Broken Spirit. Now this ending takes a little bit more explaining as
the most JRPG names ever. I love it. Oh my gosh.
Localization of one of the scenes was messed up a bit,
These are all
translating
so
it from Japanese to English. Luckily, Kaim makes it to where Footy is being kept before she is murdered. Mana starts to speak, and it seems that what she is saying is what Footy truly feels of her position as a goddess, but also tells her true feelings about her brother. Footy looks to Kaim. He turns his head away, which prompts Footy to take a nearby dagger, and she proceeds to end her own life. This was a bit confusing at first, but when I looked deeper into why she would overreact like that, I found that in the Japanese version of the game, it is pretty much implied that Footy holds romantic feelings for her brother Kaim, and that's why he turns his head away from her out of shame, and hence why we get such a heartbroken response from Footy. Anyway, FootyEye ends up dying again, and while NieR tries to take her body to a seed, he ultimately fails this time and dies alongside her. From this point, Angelus points out that a human is at the altar, and it ends up being Mana. She tries to summon a dragon, but ends up getting killed by it instead. By the time we reach the altar, Angelus has taken on a new form and states that she wishes to break their pact. It's stated that the dragons were originally created by the Watchers as tools to be used against humanity, but eventually became powerful enough to go against the Watchers themselves. Dragons are starting to revolt against mankind, and Angelus is no different. The final fight of Ending C is between Kaim and Angelus. After a long battle, Kaim ends up winning. He destroys the seed and hears hundreds of dragons outside. He looks at Angelus one last time and runs outside to face the threat that hovers over mankind and meets an unknown end. This is Ending C, a companion's eternal farewell. For Ending D, we start off at nearly the same point as we did with Ending C. We are exploring the Empire Castle looking for FootyEye, but taking a different path leads Kaim and the party to Mana. Saray recognizes his sister and steps in to protect her and tries to get through to her, but the influence of the Watchers is too strong and none of Saray's words reach her. Saray blames himself for why his sister is the way she is, and after a moment of silence, he asks Golem to kill Mana. Right after Mana's death, it seems as though victory was achieved, but with her death comes the end. The Watchers, or Grotesqueries, which they are otherwise known as, end up falling out of the sky one by one. Later, Eriosh ends up being devoured alive by the Watchers. In an attempt to kill them, Leonard sacrifices his life. The Queen of the Grotesqueries, better known as the Queen Beast, rises from the ground and is the final boss for this ending. Angelus brings up the point that Saray had made a pact with Golem and how he had given up his time. And says that if Saray were to break his pact with Golem, he should be able to save the world by freezing the Queen forever. Kaim and Saray agree with the plan, and they send Saray over to the Queen. During their attempt to get Saray over to the Queen, Kaim and Angelus are killed as a result. Saray breaks his pact in the area around him, and the Queen freezes the time around them, forever trapping them in a black crystal and saving the world.
I'm ready for E.
This is Ending D, the wild dreams of a deluded child. Now finally, here we are, the canon ending that leads to the creation of the NieR franchise. Ending E, the end of the Dragon Sphere. In this ending, we pick up where we left off right before the party sends Saray off to the Queen Beast. Instead of sending Saray to finish it, Kaim and Angelus decide to directly attack the Queen Beast. They unleash the time consumed by the Queen, which causes the portal to open. Kaim, Angelus, and the Queen all fall through it to an unknown location. They all end up in modern-day Tokyo. After one of the hardest final boss fights ever created, Kaim and Angelus defeat the Queen. By defeating the Queen, her body breaks down into a chemical unknown to Earth science, but is very similar to the look of sodium chloride, or salt. This element is known as meso. The meso from the Queen causes a syndrome called the white chlorination syndrome to come into existence. Any human that catches the disease is forced into making a pact with the gods that created the Watchers. If they agree, they are turned into red-eyed monsters known as Legion, and if they refuse, their entire body turns into pillars of salt. Angelus and Kaim are shot out of the air and killed by the Japanese Air Force. While it is unknown what happened to Kaim's body, Angelus's body ends up being impaled on Tokyo Tower, only to be retrieved and stored for research purposes by the Japanese military afterwards. The last thing I will leave you with so that I can give you some food for thought is that the source of the red-looking magic...
What? We were just having a nice little JRPG adventure. Then we just end up in Tokyo. The Air Force is killing the Protect. Somehow that's even more JRPG. What is this?
Last thing I will leave you with so that I can give you some food for thought is that the source of the red-looking magic in NieR is a result of the meso used from Angelus's body that they later experimented on. This is where Drakengard ends, but the start of NieR begins, is what I would like to say, but we still have Drakengard 3 to cover, and there are some important aspects that you guys should know before venturing into NieR Replicant. Let's get started. Now, while Drakengard 3 may not seem as important as Drakengard 1 is to NieR, it's actually quite the contrary, as Drakengard 3 is actually a prequel to the first Drakengard game. Understanding the backstory will give further details to not only the events that play out in Drakengard 1, but also explain some of the references made in the NieR games as well. Let's start with our main character, Zero. Zero isn't actually her real name, but her real name is unknown. Zero grew up in a very abusive home with only...
looks really good. Probably was 2010. Yeah, 2013.
Her mother.
Okay.
For some reason or another, Zero never blamed her mother for her cruelty towards her. Her mother then sold her off when she was a child to prostitution. Ever since, Zero's had nothing but a terrible life. She would do anything she needed to do in order to survive, which included killing a numerous amount of people, but eventually contracted an illness.
This series
Zero was
loves
caught and thrown into a cell
white,
with 5 other girls who had been
black, and
caught for
red.
trying to conspire against the Lord of the Land.
It's
Those
a
same
very
5
sharp
girls
color
were subject
palette.
to horrible torture. All of the girls died one by one until Zero was the last one remaining, and that is when her illness caught up with her. Upon her last moments, Zero gazed upon a
Basically Black Widow.
beautiful pink flower that rose up out of the ground. Zero eventually dies, but the flower revives her by taking root deep down inside her. Zero became a tool of destruction due to the influence of the flower and how it wanted to destroy humanity. It then gave Zero the power of an intoner. An intoner is a godlike being that possesses magical abilities through the power of song. Later, Zero attempted to destroy the flower by ending her life, but that resulted in the flower creating 5 more intoners based on Zero's memories of the 5 girls that were in a cell with her and splitting Zero's powers among them. The girls are called 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 respectively. Zero sees the creations of her intoner sisters as her own fault, which is why the main events of Drakengard 3 revolve around Zero trying to kill all of her sisters so that she may rid the world of the flower that aims to destroy humanity. Zero eventually finds a dragon called Michael. While enemies at first, the two grew closer with time. Zero's aim in trying to find a dragon is simple enough. It turns out that the dragons and the flower are deeply connected with each other, and that the only way to get rid of the flower from the world is through the power of a dragon. Once Zero has killed all of her sisters, it will be Michael's job to kill Zero in order to rid the world of the intoners and the flower once and for all. This is when Drakengard 3 begins. Zero and Michael team up and take on the 5 sisters.
It was all before the game started?
And
Okay.
Zero loses her left arm. Michael also ends up dying but reincarnates and is renamed to Mikhail. In defeat, Zero and Mikhail go into hiding for a year before attempting to face the sisters once again, and it is then decided that she will go over the sisters one by one. This is where I will dive into Drakengard 3's endings and what they end up being canon to. As far as ending A goes, Zero successfully kills all of her sisters, but in the battle with 1, Mikhail dies and Zero is killed by 1's clone that she made by sacrificing one of her ribs, except this clone is a male, who we will refer to as Brother 1 for the rest of the video. After killing Zero, Brother 1 goes on to create the cult of the Watchers in the image of the dead intoners and ends up masquerading as 1 herself. This ending leads to a manga called Shi ni Itaru Aka and follows Brother 1 and the result of a world with just his cult and a single intoner. You may also be thinking to yourself that 1 and Brother 1 look suspiciously like 2 other Drakengard characters we know, and you would not be far off the mark as the characters.
Like, I'm always just blown away. It's like, this is such a big series. So Drakengard spawned manga and NieR and sequel games and a ton of other reading content from what I know. Like, I've heard of it, but you just don't realize how big and how much content there is till you actually start to get into it. That's crazy.
Sarai and Mana are descendants of Brother 1. While it's not exactly important to know that little tidbit of information, that's just one of many references made within these games. As I have stated at the beginning of this video, none of the other in-game endings of Drakengard 3 actually connect to Drakengard 1, but soon after the game's release, a novella for Drakengard 3 called Drakengard 3 Story Side is a novelization of the game and basically recaps all of the events that happened in the game from the perspective of Brother 1. This novella details a 5th branch, that being ending E, that directly connects Drakengard 3 to Drakengard 1. It also covers and gives more detail on different aspects of the series, such as the Cult of the Watchers, packs, and the seal system that was used in Drakengard 1. I also stated near the beginning of this video that this was the game to introduce the concept of multiple timelines, which explains the multiple endings that the games have. There is a central character who is introduced in Branch C of Drakengard 3 who is aware of the multiple timelines. This character's name is Accord. She is an android whose job it is to record the goings-on in all the different timelines that occurred during the events of Drakengard 3. Funnily enough, Accord is mentioned in NieR Automata in passing as someone who supplies the weapons at the shop in the Resistance camp. The fact that this Drakengard character is in the same universe as NieR is pretty interesting, but for now that's all we really know about her at the moment. There are other instances in Drakengard 3 that raise a lot of questions in the minds of people who have played all of the Yoko Taro games. For example, in ending D of Drakengard 3, Zero has killed all of her sisters, so she lets the flower bloom within her. This transforms Zero into a giant statue and it spawns the rest of her sisters. After an incredibly frustrating rhythm game, Mikhail effectively destroys and seals the Atoners away. Accord comments at the end that she feels sure that Zero is still alive and that they will meet again. I'm not sure if you guys have noticed, but while in this form, Zero and her sisters have an uncanny resemblance to the Queen Beast that appears in ending E of Drakengard 1. Nothing's been confirmed as of yet, but it certainly leaves some food for thought. All in all, Drakengard and NieR go a lot deeper than what I've covered in this video, and while this video was an attempt to try and help those better understand the lore of the two franchises, I would still very much recommend that anyone give the Drakengard games a try. They hold a very special place in my heart, and the storytelling, the characters, the music are some of my favorite things ever.
If NieR works out well, I'm open to going back to Drakengard.
That haven't played the original NieR but will do so when the game drops in a few days, I just hope that you're ready for what's coming because it truly is an amazingly wild ride. I hope it was a help to those out there for what this was. I tried to cover
we
all
are
the
going to
more
start
important
with
things that I figured
Automata,
people should know, but also left a lot of optional things out so that people still have a chance to go back and play these games if they so choose and encounter new things as a result. If you made it to the end of this video, I thank you so much. All I ask is that if you enjoyed or found this video helpful at all, that